Bonjour Toulouse, comme tout le monde, il faut le dire. Il faut l'avouer que je comptais poser la blague le premier, mais Marty m'a volé la scène. Donc on passe la version en anglais, sans sous-titres malheureusement. It's quite funny because the last time that I was speaking French on a stage was doing a TEDx about refugee connectivity, and the red part is just a little dot, so they're supposed to be there, and I'm trying to figure out where I should stand here so I can talk to all of you quite comfortably. And I'd like to start with a story that just came to my mind. How can I make a reference to Toulouse, considering what has happened recently in my life? And at this point in time, this is day number 77 of an 80 days around the world trip that was not planned. They just happened to have so many conferences, one after the other, and they all linked together. So when I was flying from Singapore to Frankfurt connecting to New York, I was in Airbus 380. So I'd just like to thank all of you, whoever works for Airbus and everybody else in the city for making such an amazing plane. This is really an incredible experience. Following up a little bit on what Martin mentioned during the introduction, my background is in telecommunications. So my family has been involved in connecting people for almost 100 years. And my grandfather was a telegraph operator with the Brazilian Navy. Then he built the first commercial radio station in Rio de Janeiro in 1935. So a little parenthesis here, I'm the third person from Rio de Janeiro on stage this morning, which is absolutely remarkable. So I have Beto Levy, Renata de Castro, and then I'm the third one. But rest assured, I am the last. You're not going to have to tolerate any more cariocas around here. And so basically, it started 100 years ago as a family tradition. My father was working with analog TV, I started with digital television. And the last project that I had with a major corporation was, in fact, building a massive Wi-Fi mesh network in Belgium. That's one of the reasons why I speak French. And I realized that we could, in a very similar way to the project that Renato just described, using existing equipment that is already in the homes of the users, try to do something much greater. So basically increasing efficiencies in terms of what has already been spent, but creating value just by adding layers of intelligence. And what happens there is that people had the cable modems at home, and the project was all about the Wi-Fi community where you could create a second SSID for everybody else who was a customer of that company. I'm sure you're very familiar with that because that has been deployed in so many countries now. And if you open your Wi-Fi to everybody in the community, you also have access to the Wi-Fi of everybody who is also a member. And that was the idea that led me into creating Broadlights. And the point is, how can I find resources that are already there and transform them into value to people who need it the most? And the whole point here is, how can I make sure that people in the poorest countries, in vulnerable communities, they have access to good connectivity via Wi-Fi mesh systems? And the solution in this case is to help the governments finance the replacement of the older lighting technologies with LEDs under the condition that they spend that money on Wi-Fi equipment and paying for the bandwidth. So that's the story behind Broadlights that led me to join the United Nations Smart City Expert Group. I've been going to many of those conferences, doing the TEDx about refugee connectivity, talking with the High Commissioner, the Deputy High Commissioner, on the Innovation Awards. And this is kind of the first half of what brings me to the stage today. Basically trying to make sure that we're increasing efficiencies and using resources that are out there just by connecting unrelated topics. The second half is Crypto Explorers. So I've been working with blockchain and what we call crypto, basically cryptocurrencies or anything else that uses distributed ledger technologies. I've been involved for 5 years. And I started from the very beginning working with governments to help them adapt to this new technology. I mean, recently, basically a year ago, I organized a very large symposium for the government of a Middle Eastern country. And we had 22 ministers. Basically, 700 VIPs in that specific country means that 80% of the cabinet came. Most most of the important people, so to say, in the country, the movers and shakers, they were there as well. And it happened to be the largest business gathering in the history of that country, and it was about the blockchain. So it's really quite incredible, the level of interest that we have at this point in time linked to this technology, and that's why I want to give you a little bit of a primer on how it relates to smart cities, where that intersection occurs. And Crypto Explorers, just to wrap this first part, is an association that is established in Switzerland, and we get experts from all around the world to come to a specific location. In this case, it's Swiss Crypto Valley, which is a Zug in Zurich, where there's a lot of activity going on. And we have very high-level discussions so that we can build a very strong community that trusts each other and can help further develop in these kind of deployments. And the reason why I'm traveling so much is that now we're going to Asia. So the whole point being make sure that the voice is global, then everybody have a chance to participate in what we're trying to do. So going to the next slide, it's about technology. Yes, I see a different slide there. You have lots of people a bit confused. What's crypto, what's blockchain and Bitcoin? So asking a traditional question, how many people here own Bitcoin or have any cryptocurrency? Oh, that's pretty good. So about half of you. And trying to get a very complex and difficult topic wrapped very quickly. The first layer here is crypto. So the encryption you use to access your online banking and to protect your website's visits with the HTTPS. This is technology that's been around for a very long time. It comes from way back, like encrypted scrolls using code to prevent others without a key to access this information. I would say this is 2,000 to 3,000 years old. The big change here, which is the white paper that Satoshi Nakamoto published in late 2008, is the fact that he mixed lots of different fields of science, math science in this case, and he managed to very elegantly solve what's called the double spend problem. Because if you have a photo, you're all taking photos today, you can send it, you can post it, and everybody has a copy of the same photo with higher or lower quality. But you cannot do that with money, right? So you want to make sure that anything that has intrinsic value can only be held once by the person who has the ownership, and then it can be transferred, and all the complexity that you can imagine with a note that is backed by a government. How can you do that without the government? And that's a problem that was solved. So effectively, distributed ledger technologies is the next level. So everything is encrypted, and there are multiple ways of encrypting. The distributed ledger part means that you don't need a central authority. It's decentralized in a sense that anyone can download the software and then become a Bitcoin miner, because that's what's called permissionless network. Anyone can join, which is why I have millions of people, some trying to make money, some just curious or trying to help. And every single transaction gets recorded in millions of computers, which doesn't prevent people from hacking every computer. It just makes it impossibly expensive for them to do that and still have a profit. So what DLT is doing is increasing the cost of corruption and theft to an extent in which it doesn't make any sense anymore. And by doing so, it eliminates the double spend problem, because you cannot hold a token that has a specific asset and then try to cheat by giving that token to multiple people. Everybody on the network has full access that, no, that token belongs to this person. You just sold it yesterday. You cannot sell it again. And that leads to the third level, which is blockchain. And blockchain, for some reason, is not a very sonorous word. It's not exactly the easiest one to understand. It's just an implementation of a distributed ledger technology, which is based on encryption techniques that have been around for a long time. And the name blockchain, again, trying to oversimplify it, is that every time that you solve a very difficult mathematical problem that has the transactions that you're trying to conclude, the person solving the problem issues a block and gets paid in Bitcoin or any other currency for that specific block. But every single block has a reference to the previous block. And because it's all encrypted, if you want to fake the system, you need to fake every single block in millions of computers at the same time. So blockchain works really well. It's not the only DLT that can be deployed, especially for IoT. There are companies such as IOTA and a few others that are using acyclic graphics. It's a method called Tango. It's very complicated. We don't know if it works. And the advantage that blockchain has is that we have one that has been working for almost 10 years, which is Bitcoin. So you may have heard that Bitcoin is used by criminals, so by drugs and everything else. At this point in time, let's say that the type of criminals using Bitcoin may have changed because it's used for speculation. Like, if you believe the speculation is a crime or not, that's depending on the law of the land. But it's not a very good tool for people committing crime to use. And that's why when you have the Bitcoin showing that there's a stable platform for 10 years, you can start deploying other things, which leads into other cryptocurrencies and ICOs and everything else. I have to rush a little bit on this one. When you have the human aspect, is that what is happening there? What happens basically is that you're removing the central rubber stamp authority, which is a central bank or an accountant or an auditor. You no longer need that person because the devices themselves, they can trust what each other is saying, because everything is in a blockchain that can be openly verified, and it often is, by people who are interested in keeping the integrity of the system. And that allows us to be in a level of comfort of saying, well, I don't need to trust my tax office anymore. I trust the system that has been proven and reviewed to make sure that the taxation has been done on a proportional level. And because you have the element of cryptocurrencies without the need for banks, those transactions can happen very, very quickly. And this is what leads you into lots of situations, which is where do you have the complexity in the system, right? So if you end up having a solution here that allows you to automate the trust between devices, and you can really relegate the trust to the level of the actual device. You can, for instance, and we may be talking about that later, have an electric car that is self-driving that charges your crypto wallet at close to zero fee for the service, metered down to 1 meter being driven. And then that same self-driving car, when it runs out of battery, it goes to a charging station, and it pays the charging station with the same currency. So you start having layers and layers of problems that are disappearing. And that leads to the point of where's the complexity. So if you are in a world, I mean, Beto mentioned the $6 million man. I am old enough to have had one of those dolls from the early 80s. At that time, TVs were a very complex device with lots of buttons and a change in saturation, the color, and everything else. If you look at this image, the TV today is a slab that has basically no buttons, and all the complexity is taken away from the consumer. And the remote control is just one step before we're actually able to control the devices using our minds. So the complexity in the closed system is not going anywhere. It's just being shifted. So you still have the problem of how to get those very troublesome images to acquire, to process, to transmit, being delivered to the consumer. But the experience is very smooth because the consumer doesn't have to think about it anymore. And once you have a blockchain and DLT technologies allowing you to have all the intermediaries being taken away from the system, you are in a position to do lots of wonderful things. And the wonderful things, in this case, are usually in two categories. Either you have an existing process that is being done more efficiently, or you have completely new opportunities that you couldn't even consider before because the profitability was impossible. You know, it's too expensive to pay all the transaction fees to intermediaries, so many people involved, and so on. So when you're looking at the point of blockchain and smart cities and what's that intersection, it's everywhere. Like, if you think of any industry that is related to smart cities, especially the ones that are more regulated, because regulation only exists because you need to control what people are doing. And if you no longer need to trust them because you're trusting the system, and you know that you can't trust the system because you believe in mathematics, which is a language that everybody seems to believe, even people who believe in flat Earth, they also believe in mathematics. So you end up having a common language that allows all those that want to create something new to be using and leveraging this new base that will give you new solutions, such as self-driving cars that pay the station with cryptocurrency. You don't even want to know how they're doing that. So you can think for yourself. I mean, you're here coming from different industries and backgrounds. Try to figure out what you do and what people are doing around you. Where could you benefit from the fact that you no longer need an auditor to go there and check if something has been done? Where can you benefit from eliminating lots of intermediaries and the brokers in the process? And which new opportunities will be created if you didn't have to pay for all these people in between? So what could all of a sudden become very profitable that is not profitable to do today? And my last slide, which I'll be leaving there afterwards, is pretty much showing you that blockchain is fully buzzword compliant, so it applies in pretty much anything that is being done related to smart cities and beyond. And I will leave the slide here so that we can follow up with the questions and answers and have a more dynamic conversation with my colleagues. And of course, you're most welcome to ask any questions. So thank you very much.